she's brought student leaders with her, and they're going to discuss the process of multiple perspective engagement as a means to heal communities. Their interactions with local law enforcement, educators, and others provide solutions and insights on how to heal injustice, promote hope and resiliency, and leverage unity in this moment of crisis. Dr. Holmes, thank you for bringing the students here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Silva. Okay, so to start off, I would like to introduce the students who will be leading us today, as well as one of my friends, colleagues, brothers. Officer Ryan Tillman is with us. We have Julian Taylor. We have Lexi Blair. We have Mia Tamayo. We have Lindsay Fakwa. We have Michael Metellus. And we have Julianne Westbrook. And so these are the students who will be leading us through this session for today. And I just want to provide a brief context of how we initially started this engagement. These students all at one point attended a local high school in Riverside County. And I was looking for some students to lead a county-wide unity conference, multi-ethnic, multimodal approach to engaging students and hearing their voices. And the day that I went to the school to talk to the students, they had staged this kind of protest on campus because of a graffiti that was placed on the wall at their school that said something to the sorts of white supremacy or something. And so they refused to go to class until it came down, and they even offered to help the principal remove it, but they weren't going to go to class until it was handled. And the principal worked with the district office, and by the time third period came around, they had gotten rid of the graffiti and all the students returned back to class. So unbeknownst to me, this was happening. And so when it was my turn to meet with them, they were kind of telling me what happened. And I was really impressed with the way that they were willing to collaborate and to partner with their site administrators to create a change that was impactful, one that safeguarded the tenets of their school. And the major tenet that they were defending was safety. And they said, we all need to feel safe here. And this is what we're willing to do to make sure that every student who braces these gates feels safe. And so at that moment, I realized that these were some students who I could use to really leverage the work of student engagement and civic engagement throughout the county. Now, all of the students here today are exuberantly promising. And I believe that that's the case for all students. And when we find students not able to live within and to embrace their promise, it's mainly a manifestation of the failures on the part of the adults in their lives. And I want to make sure that we own that and we take responsibility for our responsibility of helping students to realize that they do have wells of promise. And it's incumbent upon us adults to help them draw from the sources of that well in ways that not only nurture them individually, but also nurture and impact positively their communities. And so that's who we have with us today. And then Ryan Tillman is an officer in a PD in the local areas where we live. And our relationship started approximately 4 to 5 years ago. And we actually invited him to one of our campuses because there were some like Black, brown kind of stuff. And we wanted him to talk about bridging divides and these kinds of things. And at the onset of that seminar that we put together, I realized that there was a need, not because there was anything necessarily happening within our boundaries or borders that necessitated it, but there was a need to humanize police officers, just as there was a need to humanize young people in the eyes of police officers. And so Officer Tillman and I partnered together, and we developed a leadership academy called Chosen. And Officer Tillman kind of runs this, and he and a collection of other police officers, they work with students to develop leadership competencies, as well as law enforcement knowledge and skills that can ultimately lead to a pathway for those students. And we've continued to do this not because we are because we felt like, well, there's something on the fringes of here, but we thought to ourselves it would be prudent for us to prepare our communities to be able to operate in a space of coherence, of collaboration, of love, not in the event that something happens, but simply because it's healthy and it's right for our community to be in unity. And so that's how our relationship came to be. And so without further ado, and hopefully that provided enough context, we're going to go ahead and get into what we have planned for today. So we're going to operate more like a panel, and we're primarily going to listen and hear from students. And so the first question that I want to ask the kids is the title of our conference. So wait, there's one other thing that I need to say. I'm sorry. So the other thing is I worked with these kids for approximately 5 to 6 weeks. And as I grew to know them and understand what their passions were, I asked them one question. And the question was, what is sitting on top of your greatness? Or what is standing in the way of you being able to be as dynamic as you can be? And initially they were baffled by the question, but then I modeled for them the kind of vulnerability that they needed to exude in order to really get underneath what that question meant for them. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's important that we lead students where we're asking them to go, and not from the perspective of directing them, but from the perspective of modeling for them. And so when they could see me be vulnerable about things that have impacted me negatively and how I maneuvered to overcome those things, they followed suit and began to recognize and bring to surface challenges, disappointments, fears, all different kinds of things that they felt inhibited their ability to be as great as they could be. And then we led them through a few exercises of really understanding and knowing who they are, and developing their capacity to understand agency, personal agency. And so that's what we have today. And so before we get into the questions, I just kind of want to ask each of the students to talk a little bit about what that process was like. If you can do it within 30 seconds or so, that would be really good. Julian, do you want to start?
Yeah, honestly, I just feel the experiences of that was just is very important and essential. You know, like a lot of questions like that about ourselves aren't asked, especially by others. You know, we're expected to reflect on ourselves on our own, and a lot of people have time understanding and acknowledging the whole person we are. You know, the superpowers we truly have, because you know, when she asked me that question, I had to reflect on everything I've done throughout my life, both good and bad, to choose and determine who that will make me now and as well as in the future, you know? So I think that was very important, as well as being able to uplift others to do the same.
I'll go next. Hello, everyone. I'm Julianne Westbrook. So before that process, I was just kind of this manic student that just kept going and going and going. And Dr. Holmes was really the first one to ask me, like, are you fine though? Like, are you doing okay? And it made me really question, like, what I was doing with my life. And if I was just going if I was just going and going just to be doing it, or if I was just going to get somewhere. And so it really just made me look inside myself and really just develop like pretty much goals and really solidify what I wanted to do in life. So
Hello, everyone. Oh, my fault, Daisy. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Michael Metellus, and I think, yeah, what Dr. Holmes did, she honestly just let her guard down, and she showed us that she was a person. That was the first thing that we saw. We saw she was a person before she was a doctor and a professor and everything else. So we got to see like her true colors, and then once she just explained to us like we could do the same things that she's doing, it just showed us like what we're capable of doing and the things we can accomplish. And it was more or less like being a person and helping those around you, not just being a student or just being like a businessman or a businesswoman. She just showed us like, this is a life that you get to live and you get to choose what you want to do with yourself. And like seeing that as a high schooler, it was just like really eye-opening. And like, especially graduating the same following year just showed me like I can do whatever I want. Like since then I've been doing that and it's just been going good ever since.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. Just wanted to say that I completely agree with what Michael, Julianne, and Julian have said, that seeing Dr. Holmes talk about herself and opening up to us really just made it easier to relate to her and then also open ourselves up to her. But just in general, the experience was, like Julian said, essential, I think, because we're trapped in this cycle of just doing school and homework and not really looking at ourselves and like asking ourselves, like, are you okay? So I think questioning if there's something stopping us from growing really makes you look at yourself and really realize the potential that you have. And yeah, just realize your greatness.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Mia. And so just to add on to what my peers have said, the experience that we had with Dr. Holmes was such a unique experience. And I think one of the key things to point out was that she came and she showed us a level of vulnerability and respect that many of us have never seen from any other adult or authority figure in our lives. She didn't come to us and throw her title at us, but she came to us as her peers, and she came to us for advice. And so before we start answering the questions in the panel style, we just want to ask you, like, what are you here for? We need to know that you're here with the right mindset and that you're here with the right intentions, because what are you really here for? If you're not coming to us with a genuine desire to create real change, then why are you here? And so that's just something that we want to ask you as the audience before we go into the questions that we're about to discuss, because we are going to come to you with a level of vulnerability. And so we're asking for your respect. And we just want to know if you're here with the genuine intention to create real change.
All right. Is Lexi on?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so we can go ahead and get started here. So the first question is, of course, this is the RAPSA conference, and how do we best support students at risk or at promise? What in particular, from your perspective, is needed for our youth to thrive, feel safe, etc.?
I would like to answer this one first. So coming from a student's perspective, I sort of have an issue with the labels of at risk and at promise. I feel like as we grow older, it is less acceptable for us to not know what is going on, and it's less acceptable for us to be vulnerable. And so as adults, we place labels on things and we place things into boxes as sort of a coping mechanism. But really, when you think about it, labels are how we got into a lot of the messes in this world in the first place. For example, with race, for example, with religion, putting labels on things and putting things into categories is not always necessary. And I believe that statement falls with these terms at risk and at promise. To put you into a student's shoes, imagine if you were to be placed with this label by your boss, to be told you're at risk. Like, imagine how that would feel for you. Personally, for me, it wouldn't make me want to try harder. It would make me want to crawl into a little ball and cry. I mean, yeah. So I don't know. As a student who has always been labeled as at promise, even though it is a good label, it's not necessarily something that like I would want to place on anybody else either. It's given me a lot of mental health issues, and it's giving me a lot of things. It's giving me this feeling to just have to keep going after something and not want to rest. And so I really just think either way, the labels, I really think we could just do without them.
to add on to that, as far as Julianne was referring to as it being defined, the labels that are being defined, these are made and determined by many different people of many different circumstances as well. So we must be able to acknowledge the things that we truly can and may not do as well as others, but knowing that there's something that I have that that other person doesn't, everyone here, we're all one of one, so we have to be able to define who we are and what we can bring to the table on as far as being in the education system, as far as even as far as having the knowledge to someone who doesn't, that's the simple form of being able to teach. You have to be able to understand something to give it back to another person. We all have that power as we continue to learn and grow. These labels and stuff, they can be used to determine the circumstances of an individual, but it also can be seen as a limitation upon these individuals, which keep them from being removed from it or being above it. Because if you're once this, you'll be referred to as that, even if you're out of it or not. Even with the idea of being a good cop and bad cop, there will be a lot of good cops, but it can be outweighed from the bad cops because there's a difference in defining of what that cop or what it means to be a good or bad, whatever.
Excellent. So if I might ask ask you guys a second question, my time with you guys has been phenomenal. I've actually spoke at some of your schools. We've done some other conferences together. And like Dr. Holmes said earlier, our relationship has grown beyond Officer Tillman. It's, hey, what's going on, big bro, or whatever it is. And so that being said, there's been a lot of talk in light of the social unrest of defunding police, getting rid of police in schools. And so my question for you, or for you guys, is more so, how do you feel about removing officers from your campuses? And if the answer is to keep the officers in there, what is it that you need from your school resource officers to help you guys, help assist you to the next level? And almost like Dr. Holmes said earlier, kind of harvest that change that you guys need to see in the future within law enforcement in the community.
I can answer that question. Honestly, it's more or less just like whenever we're told the word professionals, it's always someone is put above you and they're put on this pedestal that you can't touch until you reach a certain age. I know when I was growing up, like 18 was the age to be until I was finally 18 years old. And I'm like, I still feel the exact same. And like, we see everything happening on social media. We see the stuff on the news. We could read articles and whatnot, this, that, and the third and whatnot. But it's just like, we have to really see these people like for who they are. And they have to put us in these positions in order to critique them. Like it's easy for us to talk to you and like call you big bro and like Mr. Tillman or whatnot because we respect you like as a person. So it's only going to get better from there because we know the culture behind it. And like, of course, kids are going to want to like be around you and be like, they're going to be comfortable with you, because that's how you presented yourself. And the same thing with like administration is like, we need to be in those positions. We need student representation in those positions in order to say what we need. Like it's 2020, about to be 2021. And since the whole pandemic, like a lot of people don't even know how to use Zoom, but they're trying to tell us how we're supposed to live our lives and how we're supposed to do our schoolwork and things we can and cannot do. Like it's a different time. There's a huge age gap between the two, between who we're learning from and what we're learning on our own. So I think it's just, there needs to be like more respect and there just needs to be more student representation in order for us to say what we need in these times of need. Because if not, then it's just a broken record. We're going to keep repeating ourselves. We're going to keep saying the same things and nothing really gets fixed. And then we keep coming around every 2, 3, 4, 5 years and we just keep saying the same things like, well, why isn't anything working? Or you're not asking the students how they feel, or you're asking them when it's too late. I can't talk to the freshmen anymore because that was 4 years ago for me. I can't tell them the same things I went through because times have changed. They may have to talk to the sophomores and the juniors. So it's like, it has to be on an occurrence of change every so often in order for everyone to stay abreast.
Thank you for that, Michael.
Somebody else want to answer that question? Officer Tillman, you want to pose that question again?
Yeah, no doubt. So I get to kind of simplify the question is there's been talk of getting rid of police officers, and because there's talk of getting rid of police officers in the schools, I should say, some think that's a great idea and there's some that think it's a terrible idea. I know myself working in the school as a school resource officer, If I asked almost 100% of the student population at my school that I worked at, every single one of them will be against it, because I actually harvested relationships with and mentored all of those kids there, whether directly or indirectly. And so what do you guys need to see as students from the officers if they were to decide to keep officers in the schools? And I feel better with the officers out of the schools. What's your reasoning behind that? Just so that way, because again, I like to look at myself as a voice to convey to the officers in the community of law enforcement, as this is why they feel and this is why they feel that way. So I hope that kind of is a clear question for you guys.
If it's okay if I can quickly add on, to be exact, a big thing or a very important thing you did when you came to us was, when Michael was referring to respect, that was a very important thing, because essentially that's really all it is in understanding these circumstances. Like Michael was saying, him being a senior now, him being able to try and go back and tell a freshman certain things, it won't be respected because they feel that's just a person that has reached a limit that they haven't yet, so they have that authority. And so as far as cops and security resource officers being at our school, even if they came their first couple of days, like you did, without their badge or bulletproof vest or big army pants on, that's a little frightening for a lot of kids. And going back to the defining thing, we define someone walking up to you with shades on and those big black boots, and it's a little frightening. And if they're not here to like give us like a candy, they're here to punish us or question why we're doing something. So even coming to our school without the badge on, with the cool little hat, talking to the football players, that establishes that quick bond with someone who does have that credibility amongst their own peers to distribute. So now you have credible sources that support you, and you have established relationships with some people, and it starts with that few. So
thank you, Julian. That was excellent.
Okay, so let's move on. So what do you believe is needed to build trust within the community of the educators you work with, city officials, and from your perspective, why do you think there is distrust in the community?
Go, Julian.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to overbear you guys with my voice, but this was a question I also looked at in regards to, because what we're talking about, that important word of trust, I came up with a little slogan after like going into the questions. Trust is gained after the bond is made, so it's like you have to have that bond, that relationship with someone to respect them. And then having the trust, that comes with integrity. Integrity is being able to do the same thing or apply the same principles or morals when authority isn't looking. So, I mean, if you can trust someone, that means that the rules you tell them to follow, you trust them to do it when you're not looking, and you have to hold them to that standard. You can't continue to enforce these rules and then sneak behind their back to see if, or catch them not doing it. That's just forcing them to do it when you're not looking. That establishes a constant cycle of distrust and a continuum of lack of respect for one another. And it's a lack of respect for, like, it feels like, at least for a student, that you don't think I can move 20 feet away from you without me doing something bad, without you looking. So when I do move away from you, I am going to do something bad, because if I get in trouble, you're going to think I was doing something anyways. So it's that simple mindset that can easily be like adapted after not having that trust. So yeah.
I'd like to speak on the behalf of the city official part of this question. I feel my entire life I have gone to schools in lower income areas, and I really feel like there is distrust because the areas where these students live, they're not cared for in the same way that areas where like the rich people live are. And I think if city officials really took the time to get off their high horse and go down to the lower income communities and get to know the people, and understand their struggles, I really feel like that could be the thing that bridges the gap. You know, I don't understand how somebody is expected to care for a part of a city that they've never been into because they feel it's too dangerous to walk in. Um, and personally, I feel like if you haven't experienced the struggle of a community, you shouldn't be the leader of it. I've and the same thing could be said for educators too. Um, as an educator, you need to get to know the demographic of your school. You need to know, what am I getting into? What is the most prominent struggle I see? Um, and when you really understand it and see where the student is coming from, a trust will be built and that gap will be bridged.
Perfect. If I can ask you guys one of the next questions, one of the things I said earlier, and I think one of the reasons our relationship is so good is we talked about having that relationship with one another. There's a lot of adults that are listening to you guys right now, and I think that's why this panel is so cool, is because it's giving you guys a voice. But when you guys tell me things, or when you guys tell Dr. Holmes things, it makes it easy for us to go back to our own peers, communicate these messages, so that way we can move forward and try to offer you guys better solutions. What are some things that you guys can potentially do when an adult has some issues that we're trying to work out, and we can come to you guys and say like, hey, this is what we need to do, and this is how we need to move forward? What are some ways that you guys can be able to convey that with your own peers, so that way we can move forward? Because we talk about bridging that gap, and I think that's where we can start to bridge that gap, is knowing that, hey, we have influential people, that you guys all are influential, you guys all have a voice, but we can trust to know that you guys can go back and convey that same message, so that way we can move forward on similar issues.
Yeah, okay. So for this question, when you guys are telling us information that you need us, so you're counting on us to relay the message to our peers, that is where communication comes in and trust is built. And so I know that if you or Dr. Holmes tell something to Michael, then it will get relayed to us. However, I think that this goes back to the simple fact of that the adults, you guys first need to believe in your students. You need to believe in your youth. You need to believe in this generation, and you need to trust us to communicate with each other and offer us the same respect, so that every time that we tell you something, we know that you're going to go and you're going to communicate with your peers, and we will provide you the same in return.
So I've heard this said a time before, that you have to give them the trust before they earn it. Understanding that they might make mistakes and it might not be perfect, but it provides a level of engagement so that students can experience things and grow within that experience through the guidance of adults. And so we extend trust before they've earned it. And that's how we help them to evolve as our emerging colleagues. So the next question that I would like to ask for you guys is, what does fighting for justice look like in your perspective? Mr. Silva started off with referencing some of the comments and a presentation that was made this morning about the George Floyd situation and how that's impacted our world, our communities. But what does it mean to enact justice from a student's perspective?
All right, so I spent some time with this question. And so first, breaking down the question, I would like to give the definition of justice, which is just behavior or treatment. And then the definition of an act is to act out a role. So off the bat, if you truly want to enact justice, which I believe is why you guys are all here today at this conference, then you must step into the role of acting out just behavior and treatment. And so I'm going to come back to that in a second. But it's okay to be uncomfortable, because oftentimes fighting for justice is going to be uncomfortable. This right here, a lot of us are stepping out of our comfort zones with this conference. A lot of us are stepping out of our boxes so that we can truly fight for justice. And the other thing that we need to mention is that fighting for justice is not a trend. It's not something that you do to make yourself look better. It's a fight that you need to desire to see a difference, and you need to genuinely want to be a part of the solution. And so in order to be an effective agent for change, you must take the time to learn about what you're fighting for and establish your stance on the situation first. So you might need to take a little bit of time to learn, and it's okay to be quiet during this time to learn, but then you need to use your voice. You also need to be genuine and be yourself and stand firm in who you are. You can't just switch it up. You can't switch from side to side. When you're fighting for justice, you need to know your stance and not change up. And a big part of fighting for justice is also holding your peers accountable, holding your peers, your community, and yourself accountable, and correcting them, telling them how you're messing up. And this may be one of the areas where you're going to be uncomfortable if your boss is acting out against justice, if your boss is being unjust, and you need to talk to them and tell them, like, and have a civil conversation with respect, but you need to hold them accountable, because if you choose to turn a cheek to injustice per se, then you're never going to be a part of solution that you so desperately say that you desire. And so, like I said earlier, if you truly want to enact justice, you must step into the role of acting out just behavior and treatment. This doesn't mean just for the people who look like you or people who have the same position and authority as you, though. It means for everyone. It means that you're fighting for justice for everyone, and that you need to approach them with respect and just treatment.
Mia, what would it look like if an adult was working with you in a just manner?
Yeah, and so for that question, I think that we have been able to experience this through working with Dr. Holmes, because you came to us, and like I said before, you were vulnerable and you were respectful. And another thing was that you never negated our opinions. You never took what we told you when we opened up to you, all of our opinions. You helped us use them. You helped us turn them into fighting for justice. And so I think that having that open space with people like you, having that open space to talk freely, is definitely something when it comes to fighting for justice.
Okay.
If I can add another quick slogan, that's known, you have to be the change to see the change. Because, like, I mean, it literally sums up what Mia said all in one, because honestly, the best way to lead is by example. A lot of people sometimes can and may take words for granted, such as rules trying to be enforced through a 20-minute lesson during class, in every class. Just actually applying these rules every day, being able to have trust that students will apply these rules when not in your presence, as well as others. This refers to teachers, this refers to law enforcement, as well as even city officials, as far as having the communications between housing and the implementations of new structures around our communities. Like, we have to have a lot of communication, and we must be the change to see the change.
So to talk about some of the programs that have been entered into, like that Dr. Holmes has been doing, and that's why I love and appreciate Dr. Holmes so much, is because she truly believes in you guys and the work that needs to be put into these schools. How have some of the programs, and like I said, I did a presentation with you guys recently, how have some of those programs impacted the way you guys can move and navigate through school, or actually just kind of change up your way of thinking, so that way others that are watching this can kind of start thinking outside the box with their own students?
I want to say it's never had that actually, because in the professional, so everything so many years like see that there's no way.
Mike, there's something going on with your sound.
No.
Hey, Mike, try to log out and then log back in. And if somebody else wants to answer that question while he does that.
Get some earbuds.
I can add on, if I may. Hello, my name is Lexi Blair. I'm a senior at John W. North, and I'm super late, plain and simple. But I am a part of this group, and my friends, I'm sure, have taken you through our journey, our experiences, and what has led us up to this point. As Mr. Tillman was saying, the things that we have on our campus, the organizations, the things that we do on campus have kind of helped us and allowed us to kind of be who we are, or have given us the opportunity to do some of these things. I guess I could say our student leadership. A lot of us have been connected to student leadership in some way. And that is something that specifically at North, a lot of times it takes raw, pure talent or leadership skills and forms us into a leader in a way. And I can't just give all of my credit to student leadership. But I know for a fact that that's kind of something that helps create a foundation for a leader, for a change agent on any campus. And so with that being said, Mr. Tillman has come to one of our leadership meetings, and he has given presentations many a time. And every time he has, it's been very impactful. And I just feel as if when a student has raw, pure, just leadership talent, and somebody can see that and somebody can look at you and say, okay, I'm gonna help guide you, I'm gonna help lead you in the direction that I feel as if you will fit best. And I'm sure they've already talked about just the different leadership skills that each and every person on this screen that you see has. Michael, Julian, Mia, Jules, and Lindsay, we are all different. We all have different areas where we function really, really well. And that's what makes us work. I kind of was on the phone with my friend last night and I was like, how dumb would it be for us to come on this conference and just have nothing but, oh, we're going to do a conference. No, we sit down, we talk to each other, we learn about each other's families, where we've come from, where we've been. And because of that, it's created just a different kind of perspective for me. I'm not in my little bubble anymore. And although I don't know everything about these people, I know enough to understand that it's not just me. It's about the collective group. So I feel like student leadership has definitely been a foundation for me and my friends to help us become who we are today. But there are a lot of other factors.
But Lexi, what about students who aren't involved in leadership? What about students who are at the fringes, who we're on the brink of losing?
Right. With that, all it takes is an attentive adult or another peer to say, hey, like, I see something in you. It just takes that. Right, Dr. Holmes, outside of student leadership, that's a good question because not everyone is in student leadership. It literally takes one event, one thing. That's what happened with us. It wasn't by chance, but it was something that Dr. Holmes saw inside of all of us. And she made up in her mind and decided that she was going to take us along for the ride, that she was going to give us an opportunity to have a platform. Something that I wrote down last night is that when a student's superpower is revealed to them, it's a shock to their system. But when they are given the opportunity to use their superpower on a certain platform, it's a shock to the system. So the collective, whatever system we're discussing, law enforcement, city officials, or even the school education system, it's a shock to the system. So it only takes an adult, a peer, to say, hey, I believe in you. Hey, I see something in you. Hey, we can do this together. Hey, it's going to be okay. Hey, you can reach higher and go higher than you ever thought you could. That's all that it really takes. So.
Okay. Thank you, Lexi. Did Mike come back? Okay, so we're going to move to this next question. How do you individually or collectively plan to be accountable for creating the environment you believe our youth needs? That's the first part. And how do you personally plan on being a part of the solutions to the issues that face your communities and your school communities? And what measure of accountability do you plan to uphold for your peers? How are we all going to do better?
Well, to start, it simply refers to, even with the last question I wanted to add, but with this as well, it's consistency. You have to be able to apply your principles, your ideologies, your values every day, in times of need, in times of fulfillment, happiness, even just feeling normal. You have to be able to be consistent and working hard every day and making sure that you emphasize the smallest things you do when you're contributing to other people. Making sure you have you feel happy when you're smiling, when you're serving other people, doing your service as your job, uplifting others, even as far as being a cop, giving someone that ticket, uplifting them, making them feel better, not just feeling like this is just a job I have to do and something you're gonna, it's just, you have to be able to be consistent and stay true to what you feel is right and not just change it based on how you feel. It's very easy to be overwhelmed in your own situation stuff. You start to, it's a selfishness, because it's you feeling everything going on in your own life. That's when we feel the most sad, when we're most self-absorbed. You have to be able to still apply what you know is right for everyone else around you to continue to stay progressive and to help you establish that pattern of good deeds, where it's a form of a cycle and not a force.
Okay.
If I may add on, for me, planning to be accountable for creating an environment looks exactly like what we are doing at this moment. It is going to the people who can make the change and telling them exactly what change you need. I'm a very firm believer in the fact that it doesn't always have to be the adults mentoring the youth, and it can very well be the reverse and have a much more powerful outcome. And yeah, so mentoring the adults and telling them what we need looks exactly like creating an environment that is better for the youth.
Okay. So I have a question. You guys have been out of school going on 8 months now, and have experienced some political happenings, pandemic, and all of these things. How are you guys doing social emotionally? And what are you hearing from your peers about what you guys need given the current landscape, socially and politically?
I'll go ahead and take that. Um, that's an interesting question, just because of the fact that there are so many things that we are feeling. That's kind of the problem. There's so many things. And one way that I can sum it all up is in the word distress. We are in distress. Like you said, Dr. Holmes, there are a lot of things that have happened, a lot of things that have occurred in such a short amount of time. And it just feels as if we've kind of been put into the washing machine that's just going and going and going. And there's really no stopping. The youth need support. We need help. And it's crazy to say that because it's true, but a lot of times you will see us, social media, in just the media in general, and we are freedom fighters. We're going out there and we are fighting. But it's because we understand that it's because we have to survive. We have to do something. We can't just sit back and watch, because if we sit back and watch, nothing is going to happen. And so we have to fight. We need to be supported, and we just need to be taken care of. We need to be cared for. For me, being a senior, I just turned 17. We're literally in this transitional phase, and there are so many things that we have to kind of just digest in order to get to the next chapter of our lives. There's a lot of things that we have to do in order to get to this next chapter of our lives. And it seems as if the youth have either just been put on the back burner, or it's been to the point where it's like, oh, they can take care of themselves. They're fighting in the streets, for what they want. They're good. They can take care of themselves, when in fact, we do need support. And in that way, supporting what we're fighting for. We've taken this role upon ourselves because, like I said, if we sit back and watch, nothing is going to happen. What kind of world are we going to live in if we just sit back and watch? And so for those students who are proactive, for those young people who are proactive, understand that even though you see this super tough exterior, like nothing is phasing them, like they're just powering through this world that they're living in, understand that there is so much more going on inside. and you have to nurture that student. You have to take care of that student. If you're an adult who wants to see a specific student or young person succeed, you have to understand the time that it takes to unpack everything that we've gone through in 2020. It's been quite a lot. And we're still trying to go through it, I guess you could say, ourselves, trying to figure out and sort out what has just happened to us. A lot of trauma has, happened. A lot of traumatic events have happened. A lot of things we haven't processed yet. So you have to kind of keep those things in mind, regardless of what it may look from the outside. You just kind of have to keep those things in mind. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Lexi, what do you mean? Can you be more specific when you talk about support? You say our youth needs support, but what is that? What is that?
And I'll say this, and I'm sure my peers can add on, because each young person is different. And so I know for a fact when I say we're in distress, emotionally and just, with our mental health, we really do need support. And I don't even know if it's quite putting things in place to where, like an organization to where young people are going to have to go and talk about their feelings and stuff like that. But and something that I wanted to say earlier is that something that helps a young person open up is when you take your labels and your platforms off, I guess you could say. When Dr. Holmes came to us, it wasn't really Dr. Holmes, that feeling of intimidation. She took that down. She was honest with us. She became human in a sense. When teachers come down from Mrs. or Mr. and they're just talking to you as if maybe they're a friend or family. And I understand that there are lines that have to be drawn in the sand and things that we have to do in order to keep just a professional tone. But I believe that it's really, really, really important for people to understand that you have to step down from that in order to reach a student. Students don't have these labels, and I'm sure we talked about the at-risk and at-promise labels. Those labels just give people an excuse to fail or to succeed. And I believe that it's really, really important to take those labels off, to start scratch from me being human and you being human, and really making sure that we discuss these things that we need to talk about, making your student or your young person aware of the fact that, hey, like, I know that I don't understand, but I will continue to sit here and listen to you. I will continue to be that person for you. Just instilling in them that you're here. And I know for a fact that I'm really harping on the emotional support, and I'm sure my peers have something else to add outside of that, but I really think that our mental health as young people is depleting because of the fact that we are fighting for our lives.
And
So.
if I can add to Dr. Holmes' question, because, and this is, like I said, this goes into that social emotional. My question for you and all of you guys, and just being transparent, I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of reading about cell phones and social media, things like that. And this is kind of more of a forecasted, solution from as far as when we go back to campus and you guys are in person together. But do you guys feel that these cell phones and social media are contributing to a lot of these social emotional stress that you guys are going through? Because I remember when I was in high school, we didn't really have cell phones. And I mean, if you saw a cell phone, I mean, it was like murder she wrote if you had a cell phone on campus. And so, at the time it sucked, but looking back, I think it actually helped us tremendously because I didn't have that added distraction while I was in school to kind of take away from that learning atmosphere. So if you guys can answer that question, do you guys think that some of these cell phones and social media things are detrimental to your guys' social emotional health?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, to go off of what you said, Mr. Tillman, cell phones are for sure. They definitely have a big part. I know there's a couple documentaries I had to watch in my sociology classes, like The Social Dilemma, iGen, and like everything else. But then at the same time, you have a choice every day. Like, no one is telling you to use your phone in a detrimental way. No one's telling you to only use your phone to look at the Kardashians or someone else. Like, you have a choice. You get to make your own decisions. There's not a gun to the back of your head saying you have to be sad, you have to be depressed, you have to do these things in order to fit in. So like, we have choices, but then again, you have to remember, like, these things are put in front of us. We were given phones at a young age in order to not bother our parents. So it's each his own. Like, I'm pointing a gun at you, but you point the same exact gun at me. So it goes back and forth with how we react to things and how we use things in either a positive or negative connotation. And the same thing that Lexi was saying earlier, like, it's been a long year altogether, but then at the same time, it's what you're feeding off of, who you're listening to, and what you're doing for yourself. I can't go to Dr. Holmes and Mr. Tillman and ask them to raise me up every single day. Like, I have to do this on my own. And like, it was crazy because the seniors didn't get to graduate, and like me knowing I have to go to school next semester or I may have to stay home. You have to make these own decisions for yourself because the world goes on, nothing stops. Like, there's been a plenty, like, rest in peace to all the people that passed away this year, but it didn't stop. You still had to pay bills. You still had to live your own life, and you still had to make your own decisions. So it's tricky how we're told, like, yeah, you have to make your own decisions, but then again, it's like we're still being fed on a plate. So like, how do we move? And I think that's what my peers are saying. It's kind of like we need the professors, the teachers, and all the professionals to say these things and to really show their faces in front of us in order to show us we could do the exact same thing. Because I never would have wanted to get my doctorate degree if I didn't see anyone that looked like me that had it. I would have followed the same path and probably just got a 9 to 5 and just went from there and told my kids the same thing. Like, I need to see these things. I need the representation.
So with the last few minutes we have, and speaking from your wells of promise, what words would you like to leave with our participants today? What would you want them to know about how they could best serve the students in their communities?
All right. Well, I have another slogan.
30 seconds or less.
30, okay. Their slogan is, it must be real to feel real. So when we're referring to all of this change, all of this doing stuff the next time, it must actually be real and not because you know that it's the right thing to do for the sake of someone else. You have to be able to want to do it, to actually do it the right way. As far as even with Dr. Holmes being a doctor, is although she did remove that label, she didn't, she's a doc. That's what a doctor does. That's what she does as a doctor. So that's what her job is, to help and protect and aid others when in need, and to help us be better. So it's not even about removing the label. It's about changing the label and what it really means to you.
If I may add, I guess my message to everyone would to be take the time to understand the youth. A lot of people don't know how hard it is to grow up, and the only representation you see on the screen is another person being shot to death because of the color of the skin that matches your exact same tone. Understand that when we don't have an assignment in, it very well could just be because we didn't want to do it, but that's because we lack motivation in these times, and maybe just give a little bit of leniency and just really understand, and please try to get to understand us.
Yeah, and so leaving that off on the last note for on my end is the first tool that you can give any student is to believe in them. And much of today's youth, they don't have anyone who believes in them. And so when you label them at risk, you're taking away any bit of belief that they had in themselves. Instead, they lower their expectations of themselves to the bar that you have set low. And so in your pursuit of enacting justice, first and foremost, enter the fight for justice with a genuine desire to be a part of the solution. And this may mean that you have to go, you might have to change some of your ways, and that might make you uncomfortable, but know it's okay to be uncomfortable. And the next thing is never be the reason why someone no longer believes in themselves.
Yeah, just to add on, I think a big thing is just to support. We never know what a person is going through. I mean, now we're behind screens. I could just turn off my camera and you wouldn't know what is happening in my home life, or just, and just in life in general. So it could just be simple sitting down, talking to students that can really change somebody's life. A lot of times students go to school and that's their safe place. That's their place to escape. So like Mia said, putting a label on them could be very discouraging. So just, taking a breather, and just looking at life, I think looking at yourself and just how, how you're doing, or how the people you're talking to are doing can be very life-changing.
Something that I wanted to add on after Mia, just in closing, what Mia said with coming in with the right intentions, something that I don't know if was discussed or not, is that students will be able to figure out whether or not you are coming in with the right intentions. It might be a month after the fact, it might be right off the bat, but eventually we are going to figure out what you are truly here for. And like Mia said, don't be the reason that somebody doesn't believe in themselves. Don't be the reason that a student just feels like they're being used, abused, used as a pawn, just a player in a game. I also wanted to add in that the labels and boxes that we put students in, drawing lines in the sand, making up barriers and stuff like that. Those are things that can sometimes bring comfort to know that this person is just in this little box, but you have to realize that comfort kills. And you have to continue to allow students to have the opportunity to express themselves, to break down those barriers, to be on a platform and to use their superpower in order to shock the system. So yeah.
And the last thing to close everything off is don't be intentionally ignorant. You have all this information around you. You can do whatever you want with your life. The same thing for my peers, the same thing for all the adults watching. It's your own life. You have your own face, your own looks. Just do what you want to do. The goals you had before you did it, and now you're finally in the position. Just stay 10 toes, do what you need to do, inspire someone else, and then just keep feeding wisdom. Like everything you learned, you're supposed to pass it on to someone else. Don't be selfish. Don't try to hold all of it to yourself, because that's just going to keep you back at the end of the day. And you work too hard to stay in the same spot you were in yesterday.
All right.